Hello everyone. I think we're live now, all being well. As far as I can see, the stream health is good. Sound is maybe a little high. Just let me turn it down a little bit. Don't want any distortion. Hopefully that should be, loud enough for you to hear me without it actually distorting. I've noticed on a few of the recent streams there's been just a little bit of distortion, which I'm trying to clean up and avoid. But hopefully you should all be able to see me now. So please let me know in the chat if you can see me and if you can hear me okay. Looks like it's working all right from my end. Cindy says good, Olaf says good. Sean tells me I'm live. Carlin's got a playback error. That's probably just something at YouTube's end, and it will probably sort itself out if you refresh the page, I imagine. Now you will notice, I'm assuming that we're... Great, Carlin sorted too. Hi Julie, good to see you. You'll notice that I have the camera zoomed massively out today. And the reason that I've done that is, thanks Ada, heathenish I should say. The reason that I have it all zoomed out is because I want to show you the setup, because what I want to encourage you to do with this series that I'm going to be working through over the next few months on the Threads Studio Skills live streams, I want you to actually do this at home, in your studio, wherever you normally work. And it's going to mean, in order to try it out as I'm showing it to you, you're going to need to have a setup like the one I've got here, or as close as you can get to it. Now, some of you I know will already have a setup like this. If you've done the colour course, you will already have something set up very like this. What I'm going to be demonstrating for you over the next few live streams will be, there's a large overlap with what's in the colour course already, but I'm going to be tying it much more closely to light and shadow. And what I'm going to be doing is taking a different area of the hue wheel each month and mixing light and shadow in that area of the hue wheel at different chromas, different chroma levels, okay? So today is going to be more of an explanation of how it's all going to work, and I'm going to demonstrate how it's all going to work. And I am actually going to do some mixing and some painting today, study. So today's might be a little long. I'm going to try and keep it to an hour, but you never know. If it gets interesting, we'll see how it goes. I'm going to take you through the setup in a moment and how it's all put together so that you can make something very similar yourself if you want to. It doesn't have to be exactly like this as long as the main elements are the same. You don't have to use Munsell for this, but it helps. And I will be using Munsell to demonstrate some of the concepts that I'm talking about in color mixing, okay? But the student book would be more than enough to enable you to do this. Let me just have a quick look at the comments. Well, looks good. Everybody's saying it looks good. So you don't normally see this much of my studio. So now this is the space I work in. It doesn't always look exactly like this because I'm under lights today, because we're into autumn now in the UK and the days are much shorter. So I've got various lights set up and I've zoomed it right out. Now basically this is a really good light I've got here. This is the light I'm going to be painting by. Ordinarily, my main window is right there. I have two windows, one over there and one over here, that are kind of north-northwest facing in this room. So normally I paint by natural light, but because I do these quite late, because I know a lot of you are in the US, for me this is like after 6 p.m. I'm having to do them under artificial light. So if you can use natural daylight, it's better, but it's not the end of the world if you can't, okay? So you can see also the cameras I've got set up. There's this one here that I'm talking to you on. There's this camera, which is on the painting and the subject over here, the study that I'm going to be doing, and this one, which is on the palette. And I also have set up today this, so that whatever I'm doing, you can see what I'm up to on the palette over here, okay? I know it's a slightly weird, is that bright enough? I can always change it if we decide it's not bright enough. Might need a little bit of editing, that camera. So that shows you pretty much the whole setup as it is now. I'm going to take you through quickly. Let me take the palette off for now, so I can take you through what I have here and how it's all set up. The first thing you're going to need if you want a setup like this is a still life stand. Now I'm going to dismantle what I've got here and then put it back together again so you can see how I'm working. So this is my still life stand here, okay? Now this actually is, take this down piece by piece. This is what we're going to be doing today, yellows. It's the most common color question I get is how do you mix light and shadow in yellows? So we're going to be doing some stuff with that. Now this here is a speaker stand. It's steel. It cost about £18. So in dollars, I suppose that's about $15 or something like that. Now you can buy really nice, expensive wooden still life stands, and I have got one which cost me over 100 quid. Or you can get something like this, which is absolutely brilliant. It's really stable. You can turn it. You can even put it on casters if you want. It has holes in the bottom so you can put casters on it, and you can move this up and down. Absolutely fantastic. And this is just a piece of MDF that I've painted on. I use this, you would have seen this as the background of a lot of my paintings. Pop that on there, and we've got a perfect still life stand. Okay, that's the first thing you need. Now, I've also got this. Now, this is made out of, this is a 3-sided box. You can make it 5-sided if you like, as long as the front is open. Obviously, you won't be able to see anything to paint. This is just a really basic shadow box made out of foam core. Okay. If you're going to look for a stand like that, by the way, if you go to in the US, I'm not sure, but there's a site in the UK called Studio Spares. I think it's .co.uk, and they sell these stands. You will probably be able to get something really similar to that in the US as well, I should think. So you want to look for specialist audio suppliers online, and have a look at, or just do a search for speaker stands, and then check the height they go to. This one goes to about 1.5 meters high, a little bit higher, I think, which is great. That's all you need. So plonk that there on like that, and it immediately gives us a little kind of a cut shadow here. It stops the reflected light a little bit as well. So if I get something like this, pop it in there. Granted, you can't really see from all the way over there, so let me quickly change cameras just for a second to show you that. I've got really clear light and shadow, okay? And that you could say is the top plane, is like the half tone. If I had an actual thing there, which I will be painting a study of today, again, it makes it really clear where your light side is and your shadow side, okay? We've got the cast shadow here. Now I like to have a light grey base so that I can see a cast shadow, because cast shadows are really important in helping something look real and 3-dimensional. And then we've got a black background. Okay. And of course, was just thinking, I've done the classic thing of thinking, where have I put my glasses? And they're right over here. Okay, so does that all make sense to you? Does that look like something you could set up yourself at home? Let me know in the comments in the chat if that looks like something you can do. It ought to be doable for pretty much everyone to make something like that. It's fairly simple. Now the light, as I say, if you can use daylight, then do. If you can't, I wonder if I can show you the actual. I'll tell you what I'll do. I will when I put up the replay, the unedited replay of this video in the Threads Facebook group, which I'll do either later on this evening or tomorrow. I'll also link to the lights and the bulbs that I'm using. Now this is a fairly simple lighting setup that takes a single E27 fitting bulb, which most fluorescents are like that, but the light I've got in there is an LED, and this CRI, the color rendering index, is insane. It's like 97 or 98. It's incredibly good. It's a very powerful light. It actually has a little fan, so if you can hear some fan noise, the bulb actually comes with a fan on it as well. I'll show you the box. I've just started using these bulbs and they're absolutely fantastic. I can probably do a better job of showing you this. I'll use this camera. You can find these. I got this from Amazon. They're absolutely fantastic. Okay. Now this one is, it's up to you whether you want to have one that's slightly warmer color temperature or a very cool one like this. This kind of gives you the same kind of light as you'd get from a north light on a sunny day, reflected from a blue sky. They're incredibly powerful, these lights. That's why I like them so much. And the bulbs will fit inside an ordinary light fitting. So this light fitting here is, you can get these, you get a set of 2 of them for about 50 quid off Amazon. These are Neewer. I'll link to those as well so you can see those. The great thing about them is this great big thing here is the soft box with a diffuser on the front. If you don't have something like this, something on the front of it too, can I show you? Let me show you how this works. Okay, so that's just like almost like a net curtain kind of thing that goes over the front. So the light can still travel through it. Obviously it cuts some of the light down, but it softens the shadows. And you can often tell very obviously when someone has done a painting in artificial light, because the shadows will be very sharp and hard. This makes cast shadows that look almost like daylight. So what I'm always after doing when I'm setting up a painting under artificial light, is to get as close as I can to the effect of natural light. The other great thing about using something like this, of course, is that the light never changes right the way through the painting. You can paint right into the night, whatever you want, and the light will never change. So that's the still life stand. This is the light. Now over here, I've got a drawing board set up on an easel, and on this I've got an ampersand panel. Let me show you one that I haven't unwrapped yet so you can see how they come. These are really good, easy to work on panels. They're cheap, small. This is a 6x6, and what I've done with this is I've put a wash over it to knock the white back. You'll see when I go back onto the main camera and I actually start mixing and painting what the effect of that is. I do that with all my paintings now. But I had to do it before we started because I needed it to be fairly dry before I start painting on it. So this bit is really simple, but what you need to get right about this is that the easel is right back against the shadow box. It's very, very close to it because I'm going to be working sight size. It's going to be important to work sight size for this to work out for you as well, okay? And the shadow box is facing straight towards me. The easel is angled very slightly towards the light. and that just helps to balance the light. Now this, what I've got here is a little framer, viewfinder, whatever you want to call it. Let me show you this on the other camera as well so I can show you it close up. Again, this is foam core, just with a hole cut out of it, and then with some thread measured out and stuck down with blue tack. Works great, nice and simple. And the way you stick it on there, you can use blue tack, but lately I've started using these clips. You see that? Really nice. Line it up with the panel wherever you want it to be for what you're painting. I think that's probably all right. Maybe I'll move it up a little bit and I'll change where the panel is. These are also really useful, by the way, for deciding where you want your how you want to lay out your composition, because it enables you to kind of, it helps you to kind of see this as a flat picture plane rather than as a three-dimensional thing, and that can be very, very, very useful indeed. Let me just, was that clear enough how I clipped that on there? Let me show you it close up so you can see. See, the clips just go on like this. I'm going to have to move the camera a little bit, I think. And then this has just got blue tack on the back. This is how, because they're so light and thin, you can just blue tack them on. But notice that this is the same size as this. I'm going to have to shift the camera a bit, sorry. This panel is the same size, this is this hole here. So I can translate, take over exactly what I have here, over here. Now for you, watching me do this, your viewpoint is slightly different than mine because your viewpoint is this camera here. Mine is obviously, while I'm painting, I'm slightly over to the side. So what I see is slightly different, but it will be close enough for you to get a good impression of what I'm doing. Now I'm going quite slowly with this and taking you through it all bit by bit because I want to make sure that this is all really clear. So it will really help me as we're going along. Anything that strikes you that you're like, what does he mean by that? Oh, well, maybe, how did he do that? You know, how is that set up? Well, maybe he'll tell me later. Just fire a question in the chat, okay? Ooh, lots of comments already. Let me just catch up. Yeah. Yes, but I think I will use a table or a shelf instead of a speaker stand for now. I'm having trouble knowing who you are. Is it Kate? Catod. I don't quite get what your name is from that. I'm sorry. I should know. But yeah, you'll see I've got, behind this is a shelf. And that the shelf behind here, the bookshelf behind here, this is what I do most of my paintings on, the shelf back here. But I've put this up there because it's easier to control for kind of, for this kind of thing. What temperature is the light? I believe this bulb is about 6,000. Oh, 5,400 K, 5,400 K, there you go. Yeah, I remember because I used to have some 6,000 and I thought they were just a little bit too cool. And this is actually only 60 watts, so it doesn't draw that much power, although the fan will draw a bit as well. Yeah, daylight is 5K. Yeah, about, I mean, daylight can vary, obviously. Say daylight is this or daylight is that. It varies very much based on the time of the day, where you are in the world, prevailing weather conditions mostly. You know, there can be a lot of influences on it, but yeah, that's a good average, you know. Is the ampersand board slick? No, it's slightly textured, which is part of the reason I like them so much. What I do with them these days is I paint over them with, I haven't done it with these because these are just for studies, but when I'm doing an actual painting, I paint over them with acrylic primer first, white acrylic primer first, very roughly, and it gives a nicer texture with some brush strokes to work with. Yeah, light tooth, that's right, Judy, yeah. Cindy says, when I've used them, my paint stuffs off with the brush. Stuffs off? How do you mean? Maybe I'm using too thick paint. I doubt you're using too thick paint, because what I find is most people use their paint too thin. And I've noticed in the 2 workshops that I've taught, I've had to continually encourage people to use thicker paint. So I doubt it's that, but the tooth isn't like canvas, because these things, I reckon what they do is they get huge sheets, spray paint them, and then chop them up. So it has a very uniform texture, but it does have a tooth to it. Would you also show the ampersand board label again close up? I certainly can, yeah. Shift to the other camera so you can see it. Gesso board. These are ones I. It's not gesso at all. It's a complete lie. It's just acrylic hardboard, acrylic covered hardboard. But they're very light. They're dimensionally stable. They don't bend around, and they're inexpensive. The smaller ones too, really useful. I keep meaning to experiment with dye bond, which a lot of people use these days, and I will at some point soon, but I haven't quite got round to it yet. Smoother than most canvas. Yeah, I would say it is. Yeah, yeah. Oh no, you got changed to an on. I'm really sorry about that. It goes a bit funny sometimes. Kato. Kato, is that right? Or would I say Kato or Kato? I'm not sure. Catherine. Okay. I've got you, Catherine. Right. Now I know what to call you. Is that a nick? Maybe it's your nickname. Yeah, for setting a name, you need to do it each time you come in, but it's quite simple. Olaf says between 5,000 and 5,500 is good. Yes, I would agree. We're talking about temperature of the light now. Romy says, please could someone tell me how to catch up to live stage? I think if you're watching at an earlier point, probably the best thing to do is just to refresh the page, Romy, and it should come back. And it should come back at the stage it's playing at now. Just refresh the page and then press play on the video, and it should bounce you in. However, there is a slight delay between what you see and hear and when I type something in the chat. So the chat is almost instant and the video is about 10 seconds behind. It's just the way, because there's a lot of information has to get sent up the internet basically for the video as opposed to text. It travels a little bit more slowly. Cindy says, I get background between the brushes. That's interesting. That would suggest that the paint is too short, not that it's too thick. Let me know what kind of paint you're using, Cindy, in the comments. Let me know what brand of paint you're using. It may be that your paint is just doesn't have enough oil in it. Because paint should move around, you know, pretty freely. Otherwise you couldn't blend. Okay, but so that's shown you the setup. Is there anything else I want to tell you? No, I think that's it pretty much. Hopefully that's all clear. So if you can get yourself, what would be really cool is if you manage to do it, is to have a setup like this ready for when we do a stream on this kind of stuff, and then you can actually practice along with me. But the mixing part, obviously all you need is your paints and a palette and a palette knife. You'll be able to do that as we go along. And the bit that I've always found, the bit that I want to cover more today than I have before in the colour course or even in workshops too, is people often, they get the basic idea of hue, value and chroma, which is basically Munsell, although almost everybody talks about paint in terms of hue, colour in terms of hue, value and chroma these days. Some people say they're a bit They're not convinced by Munsell, but then they talk about colour and they talk about hue, value and chroma. That's all Munsell is. That's the entirety of Munsell. There are different ways of applying it, and I have a specific way of applying it, which you know, I'll touch on while we're doing this. But it's basically hue, value and chroma. Now, for anyone who hasn't come across that before, let me just quickly find I put my Munsell page. Hopefully it's in the book, but I'm not sure if I put it back in the book. Usually I have it out and about because I talk about it so much. Here we go. So I'm just going to go through this really, really quickly because I know for a lot of you this will be kind of old news. This is basically what people are talking about when they talk about hue, value and chroma, okay? Just to make it really clear. This is value from light to dark. That's a value scale. This is chroma from grey to more intense colour, okay? So that's low chroma, that's high chroma. But all of these colours are the same value and they're the same hue. The only thing that changes is the chroma. And this is hue, whether it's more red, going around this way towards more yellow. And I think about, when I'm mixing, I think in these terms. You don't have to have the Munsell book in order to think about colour and colour mixing in these terms. But there are some things that it makes an awful lot easier if you do have it. Okay, so hopefully that's all pretty clear. So the first thing to be thinking about, okay, is to, when you're trying to decide how you're going to approach mixing the colours you need to paint a particular object, the first thing you need to think about is the hue. Okay, don't bother thinking to start with about how light or how dark it is, because that will be handled by the value scale. Okay, don't think too much about how high chroma or low chroma it is, although that does factor into what tube paints you choose. The main thing you need to know is the hue. And what I would encourage you to do, if you haven't already done it, is put some time aside to get all of your paints out of your box or your tray or whatever you keep them in, and organize them into roughly into hue families. Okay, red, yellow, blue, greens, purples. Try and arrange them together. You'll have some where there are almost none at all. Use the primaries and secondaries, you know, or use the Munsell hue wheel if you've got the Munsell book. You will find you probably have an awful lot of yellows and oranges. Those are the earths and tend to be what we paint an awful lot with. And a few greens. And if you don't have any greens, except for perhaps a phthalo green, and you struggle to mix greens, then I would immediately get yourself a good sap green and a high chroma green, lighter value green as well. People seem to think that for some reason it's wrong to buy green paint if you want to paint something that's green. I'm going to be painting some green stuff in this series, and I will use green paint. So we'll go into that in more detail there. So let me go over to the palette now. Oh, let me just quickly check the comments again. Water-based aqua dualities now moving towards real oils with Graham. Yeah, I would use oils. Definitely, I would use oils. Also with the painting kit, the lemon. Brilliant. Well done. And Olaf says, going forward, you need to inform us what paint to use, like cad yellow, your lemon yellow. That's exactly what I'm going to do now. That is what I'm going to be doing. And that's what I haven't done so much of previously with my online teaching. I'm going to be covering that more now. Okay, Cindy, I've got you. Everybody's names are going funny today. Kay says, I have difficulty matching values between different colours. Yeah, it's a tricky thing. The only way to get better at stuff like that is just to take it out, isolate it as a separate skill, and to practice it. Okay, I'll be touching on that in this series as well. I'm going to do like a kind of a deep dive on colour over the next few Studio Skills workshops. I will be covering some other stuff as well, but I'm going to be doing a lot on colour now. Okay, so I'm going to arrange here all of the tube paints that I've got that are broadly in the yellow to orange hue range, right? So in terms of hue, Cindy says, I love my green, sap green. I would highly recommend, Cindy, by the way, get hold of Old Holland sap green. It's absolutely killer sap green. It's the nicest one I've ever seen. Yeah, I'm going to adjust this camera just a little bit. I think the hue is slightly off. I suppose when we're talking about cameras, it's all right to talk about temperature, although I try to avoid it when we're talking about paint. Okay, so these are all the paints that I've got that are broadly in the yellow, tending round towards orange. So here is my Munsell hue wheel, okay? So this here is Yellow Lake. This is from Michael Harding. It's not, I have got a lemon yellow as well, actually. I should get that out. I don't use it very often. Let's see if I can find it. And I doubt I'll be using it today, but let me get it out just for completeness so you can see that I've got one. There's my lemon yellow, okay. And you can see that I've organized these in terms of value from light to dark, okay. Lemon yellow. This is Yellow Lake, PY74. It's a slightly transparent yellow, and it's somewhere in hue terms, like this one here, lemon yellow, is about here. It's not middle yellow, it's heading round towards green. This one is still a little bit way over here. Cadmium yellow, this is cadmium yellow genuine, this is Cranfield colours. They're very similar to Michael Harding's, possibly slightly higher quality, but very similar. English handmade paint. This is, it's not here, it's going slightly round towards the orange at this point when we're in Cad Yellow. Yellow ochre, in hue terms, is somewhere around in between the two, closer to the yellow than the orange. And the reason I know that, and this is one of the reasons that the Munsell book is so useful. Let's get a couple of, I'll get a page out from the Munsell book. Now in Munsell terms, this is 5Y, this page here. All of these chips are middle yellow, okay? You can see that the Cad Yellow is slightly, you could say slightly warmer, and it is slightly warmer than that. This is probably closest to the 5Y, this one, in terms of hue. Now, the reason I say that yellow ochre is more orange, the reason I know that is because it doesn't really fit quite on any of these. It's probably closest to that one, darker than that. Closest to that one, probably, in terms of hue. But let me show you something interesting. Sorry, in terms of chroma and value. If I get a little bit of that out on the palette, I'll be able to show you more clearly. It's really, really useful to know where in hue your colours are. And this is one of the reasons the big book is so useful, because it takes all the guesswork out of it. Now you can see this looks almost green in comparison to that, but this is a middle yellow. Okay. But it's a similar value in chroma. This is a slight, you could say it's slightly warmer. So if I get the same chip out, so that's this one here. Try that one. It's lighter actually. Did I get the right one? That one. Probably in terms of value, it's somewhere in between the two. Okay. Now to me, these still look very slightly greener. Very slightly than this one. So I would have to go across into the next page And the Munsell pages, all of these are the same hue, you see. So if I say, I think it was maybe going to be about maybe there. And finally we've found one that looks like it's slightly warmer. Let's try the next value up. Value terms, it's probably somewhere in between these two. And it's in hue terms, it's somewhere more towards the greener ones. But this is already, according to the Munsell book, this is already heading towards warmer, because when you go down with a yellow, when you go down in value and you drop the chroma, it starts to look very, very green, which is why you can't just mix black in to make a shadow. So that's really useful to know. This is actually 10YR, which is yellow red, which is Munsell, the way that Munsell talks about color. That's yellow red is basically orange for the rest of us. But can you see how we call it yellow ochre, but this color is really an orange. So that's useful to know. So I know immediately from looking at this. I mean, you can get this from looking at them. You can probably, if you take the time to put out little swatches on your palette and try and figure out what the change in hue is, you can probably figure it out. But this is very definitely more orange than this one, and more orange than that. So as well as going down the value scale, we're moving around the hue wheel this way, which is interesting. Now I've got, this is burnt sienna. I haven't got a raw sienna out here because I just don't use it because I find I don't need it. If I put a bit of this out, Cindy says I have a lemon yellow that's PY3. Let's see what this one is. This is PY35, my lemon yellow. Different manufacturers use different pigments for their paints. So this is what I think of as a cad yellow. In terms of Winsor & Newton paint, this is the closest to that is cad yellow pale. Cad yellow in Winsor & Newton is extremely orange and is a different pigment. Okay, so let's have a look at this one. This is the most orange page that I had out just now from the Munsell book. Okay, you can already see that this color here is way more orange than any of these. So let's try moving around the hue wheel a bit further. Here's another page. This is 7.5YR. We're starting to get very orange now, and we're kind of getting like it might be fairly close. I mean, it's fairly high chroma. Still way more orange than that, still way too yellow. .5YR, middle orange. Obviously darker than that. Still too yellow. Still too yellow, and that's middle orange, you know. Let's keep going. Next one along, 2.5YR, starting to go into tangerine kind of colours, more reddish orange. Now we're closer. Now we're closer. A little darker maybe. Chroma is slightly lower. That's probably the closest. I think it may even be a little more. Let's try just one more page around it. Maybe it's even more red than that. We're getting into real red oranges now, right? Chroma is probably about there. It's between these two, I would say. Probably between them. Closer to that one. So my burnt sienna is a red orange. That's the hue. So when I'm using that in mixes, that's what I need to know about that color. There isn't an easy way to find this out, apart from with the Munsell Big Book. I mean to find it out for sure. But with practice, you will start to get a feel for what hue a color really is, okay? So I know already that from here to here, I've swung hugely around the hue wheel. Like I started off over here with the lemon yellow, and I've swung all the way around almost to red with this one here. So let's put out raw umber. Obviously we've gone right down the value range now. And the chroma is very low as well, so the value is very low. We're talking about maybe a value 2 here. And the chroma is very low, it's quite close to grey. What would you think the hue is? See if you can guess the hue of this colour. Obviously it's more difficult when you've got very dark, low chroma colours like this. What would you say the hue is of? This is Michael Harding raw umber. Again, they're all slightly different. But what would you guess the hue to be for raw umber? And then we'll find out what it really is. Yellow, cool yellow, interesting. Olaf, that's cool. Oh, you've hedged your bets there, Olaf. You said a cooler yellow and a warmer yellow. Now, by cooler and warmer yellow, I take it that you would mean, in terms of the hue wheel, this is going more cool, and that's going more warm, right? I think everyone would probably agree that that's what you would mean in terms of hue, by cool and warm. But in relation to what? In relation to, you would say, like a middle yellow, perhaps? It's more cool, or more warm. Now, I would say I'd prefer to try to use slightly more exact descriptions. So I would say it's more of a green yellow, or it's more of an orange yellow. And that really helps me in mixes. I would, if I were you, forget about warm and cool in terms of mixing and think about hue. You'll find it easier to get much closer to what you want that way. Think about which direction a colour is taking you around the hue wheel rather than thinking about warm and cool. I know everybody says, a lot of people teach warm and cool, but frankly, no one really understands what they mean by it. I mean, you can say, yes, in that instance, cooler is towards green and warmer is towards orange. But if you were here, what's warmer and what's cooler? I mean, you could say warmer is going round towards green because you're heading round this way. Okay, definitely warmer than blue, but so is purple. You know, anything is warmer than, and blue is kind of a special case, and most of you can probably guess. But I would encourage you to try to think when you're mixing in terms of the shift in hue around the wheel. It's a much more effective way to think about colour, I think. So here is middle yellow. Green, that's an interesting one. Brown is a low chroma red, Sean says. Let's find out. Let's find out, shall we? So this is yellow. I think it's, you can pretty much say it's not that. Okay. They're kind of difficult to judge, but it's, you would probably want to say that it's warmer than that. It's slightly more orange, but it's very difficult to tell, right? And that's the middle yellow, the ones that look really green down the bottom. So this is the next one along the slightly warmer yellow. I would say it's not quite that warm. It's somewhere in between the two. So it's actually, it's almost, you would say it's almost a green, but it is in fact a yellow. It's actually just about here, slightly towards this side, but very slightly of middle yellow. Okay. Interesting one, raw umber. Now burnt umber. This is when we're going to find out, Sean. You would say burnt umber is pretty much like a standard definition of brown. Now remember when we looked at burnt sienna, it turned out that that was a very reddish orange. Here's raw umber. So if you put that into a mix, what are you dealing with hue-wise? Obviously, it's quite a bit more round towards orange than the last one. So let's take this one and have a look. definitely more towards orange than that one. They're very difficult to judge when you get down here, though. It is tricky. Let's go right round to middle orange. Okay, 5YR. Notice, by the way, something very interesting that you also see with once you start to get into this stuff. Notice that right down, this one is 10YR, so it's slightly more yellow than this one, okay? And you notice right down the bottom, at the bottom value, at value 2, there's only one chip. Because in the yellows, you can't get the chroma. This is chroma going this way. You can't get the chroma in the yellows. In oranges, you can get higher chroma. When you go around to, so you have an extra chip. When you go around to reds, you find even more. You can go up to 4 chips here, much higher chroma at the lower values. But let's try this one. This is middle orange. It's obviously darker than that. Might actually be lower chroma. That's pretty close. Let's try the next orange round and see. I think actually it's let's try the next yellow round, because I think it's more likely to be here-ish. But this is higher value, obviously, so it's really difficult to say for sure. I could try putting a little bit of white in and bring it up a little bit, and that might make it clearer. But I don't want to spend all night on this. But I would say it's probably around here, 7.5. So it's a yellow-orange. That is the hue, roughly, of burnt umber. So it's similar to raw umber, but raw umber is more yellow and burnt umber is more orange. And this is really useful stuff to know when we come to wanting to paint light and shadow, because if we look at our subject, we can see here that we have a fairly clear light and a fairly clear shadow. Now obviously over here on the light, we're going to want our cad yellow, I imagine. You can see that that's going to be a pretty close hue match to what we've got there. And we also need all of that chroma right up the top of the scale, the value scale. But the shadow bit is the bit that people often struggle with. Turn the cube a little bit so you can see a bit more of the shadow side. Okay. So in terms of the colors that we were looking at just now, let's see if we can figure out what we think that shadow side might be. Now, if you just darkened the yellow with black, you would get something that was very, very green. Okay, so what I've got here, this is the 5Y page again. So remember that the cad yellow slightly warmer, you would say. I would say slightly more towards orange. So right down the bottom of this scale, we've got this one here. In terms of value, if you match the value, we'll try and match the value and the chroma. Probably about here. And here's a handy little trick. You will, if you've done the color course again, you will have seen me do this an awful lot of my live streams as well. Is if you hold this, it's just a piece of card with a hole in it. This is actually just thick paper. And I've got a chip here. If I hold that at exactly the same angle to the light as my panel, this is the bit that matters, and hold it over there, you can really get a check. And you can do this with colors you mix. It doesn't have to be Munsell chips as well. And you see how much warmer that is. It's more round, way more round towards orange, right? So that's the one we just checked. This is the next one round that's slightly warmer. The value looked about right and the chroma was about right, so let's take that out. Look. Yeah, it's still more towards orange. The hue is still out. The value is fine and the chroma is fine, but the hue is towards orange. So let's go a lot further round to orange now. Get the same chip. By the same chip, I mean it's the same value and chroma. That's looking more like it hue-wise, but I think I don't know, I mean, that's close, that is close. Possibly it could go even warmer than that. Now, one thing about the setup that I've got in here at the moment is I've got the overhead lights on as well, and they're normal halogens, and they're quite yellow, quite orange, sorry. So there will be a little bit of reflected light, which is slightly more orange. So this is going further around. This is middle orange. And again, you can mix this. You can find them by mixing. I think we're close there, but the chroma is too low. So let's try bringing that up. That's pretty good, but I think it's gone perhaps too orange now. You see that okay? I think it's slightly too orange. So let's go back one. And you find this a lot. So this is the page that chip came from. Here's the next one, slightly more yellow. I'll pick up the same one. It's close, you know, it is close. But it's somewhere between the two of them, I would say. But that's a really useful thing to know, because that's gone so far around from here, the light, to here, the shadow. It's gone not just from light to dark and not just down in chroma. So the light, the value of the light bit is way up here. The value of the shadow is around here. But the chroma has dropped as well. So the chroma of the light is much higher, and that's almost always the case, because where there's more light, there's more color. But also it's shifted in hue from around here to like quite a way around here. And you will find that a lot, even when you're painting in daylight, especially if you're painting in north light, and it's a clear day, there will be quite a lot of hue shift, okay? So when I go back to my paints, I'm thinking about what I can use to mix the light and the shadow, right? I know that I want that this is going to be fairly close to the light. It's going to be somewhere between these two. I mean, these are very high value and high chroma, so the light is going to be somewhere around there. So that's going to be my starting point. For my shadow side, and this is where I would recommend you start for the shadow side, you're going to want something much, much warmer. Not quite as far around as this, because this was almost red, remember? But if I'm choosing between these two, although both of them are too dark, I'm probably going to be defaulting to that one, burnt umber, before I think about raw umber, because this one is much more green, and I want to be around this way. What I might find is that a combination of these will get me there, or a combination of these. But here's an interesting point that I really want to hammer this home. You won't be able to use the same tube paints to mix your colors from light to shadow. You will have to shift. Obviously, as you're going down the value range, you can't just pick a color and say, this is the color it is. And for the shadows, I'm going to mix in one of these, because 9 times out of 10 you'll be slightly wrong. Or say I'm going to mix in that. This here yellow ochre will drop. Excuse me. Will drop the chroma right down as well. Sorry, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. Now that's kind of pretty in-depth stuff as far as color mixing goes, but at that point we've already done an awful lot of thinking about what tube paints we might be able to use to paint this cube. And the reason I've got a lemon up there as well is that once you actually start to paint, you'll find that the colors of a lemon will be extremely similar to the cube. So if you can match the colors of a cube like that, then you can paint a lemon. You can match the colors of a lemon. The cube is much easier because it's flat. All of this is the same color. All of this is the same color. On a lemon, it changes across the surface. But this bit here will be the same as that. This bit here will be the same as that. So it kind of, the cube is like a simplified version of the lemon, okay. So let's say, going back to the palette, let me check the comments quickly actually, because I went through quite a lot of stuff there. Each colour has a warm and cool version, says Cindy, but with the bias of each colour, then mix warm with warm and cool with cool. Now, I would suggest, yes, a lot of people do recommend that you work that way. What you're talking about there is really it's related anyway to the split primary palette, which people use quite a lot. Now, you couldn't say every colour has a warm and a cool version, because all you're really doing is shifting hue. Try to think about it in terms of hue. So raw umber, for instance, which is here in terms of hue, although obviously much darker, if you wanted a cooler version of that, it would just be more green. If you wanted a warmer version of it, it would just be more orange. So the warmer version of raw umber is really around this way. But I think you're thinking more generally in terms of hue, aren't you? So you would say like a warmer blue is a purple blue, or, you know, perhaps you'd say a warmer blue is a green blue. You know, blue is a difficult one to say. Let's say orange. You would say a warmer orange. Possibly you would say a warmer orange is going towards red. A cooler orange is going towards yellow. And yellow is the easiest one to do. I think everyone would agree that a warmer yellow is going towards orange. And am I on the right camera? No, sorry. We'd say a warmer yellow is going towards orange, and a cooler yellow is going towards green, right? But you can start at any point around this scale and just move one way or the other. So in a sense, I mean, you're right. I mean, all colours do have a warm and a cooler variant, but all you're doing is moving around the hue wheel. It's really all that's happening there. I don't think thinking about warm and cool is going to particularly help you to mix. If you know roughly what the chroma is, the value is, and the hue, especially the hue of all of your paints, you will have a much easier time if you're trying to mix a colour exactly. Yeah, the Burnt Umber was by Cranfield as well. It's very similar to Michael Harding. I think the chroma is slightly higher on some of them, and the handling is nice. But they're very nice. It's very nice paint. So let's say I want to mix rough colours now. So let's get some of these paints out. I'll put this one out. I'm not going to put lemon yellow out because I know that it's not going that far around towards green. But I'll put this one out. This is my yellow lake. So this is let's check on the right camera. Yeah, PY74, Michael Harding, Cad yellow. You'll be able to see clearly what's happening to the hues as we go down the value scale, but it's not a straight line. That's going slightly more orange. That's gone really, really, really orange. Almost red, orange. Actually, these two, that's Burnt Umber and Ivory Black, which I used to tone the panel. I'm going to get those off there for now. Burnt Umber. Raw Umber, I'm going to put it out, although I doubt I'll use it, just so you can see it's there. And I'm not going to put black out yet, although I will do at some point. Now, where's my little tag? I've got a little. Here we go. Now what I've got here is a little, like a cellophane tag. This is actually from an OHP slide, and I just cut a little bit off, and I'm going to use it to check the colours as I mix them, okay? So let's start off with, let's start with the Cad yellow, and I'm going to put that straight on here. I want it to be fairly opaque because I don't want any light shining through it. And then I can use this. This is how you can do this stuff even if you don't have a Munsell book, okay? I'm going to use this in the same way to judge this colour, cad yellow, against the colour that I see there for the light. It's close, isn't it? But you notice how this is something that you'll find a lot once you get into, if you want to take it this far, if you want to get into this stuff. The value is slightly lower, isn't it? Right? The hue looks pretty good to me, but the value is slightly lower, so I need it to be lighter for it to be the same. The only thing I can lighten yellow with is obviously, right, is white. Sorry, wrong camera again. Now for me, lightening yellow, I would use this. This is lead white. I also have titanium, but for lightening a yellow, to keep the maximum chroma, I would use this, because the hue of this is slightly more towards yellow, and the hue of this is slightly more towards blue. So if I mix that in to my cad yellow, the chroma will drop. If I mix this in, the chroma will drop, but not by quite as much. Again, it's really useful to know what the hue is of your paint. So I know that this is, I mean, this is white, but its hue is slightly yellow-orange. It's so low chroma, it's very difficult to tell, obviously, but I'll bring the value up a little bit. The other thing also with lead white is that you have to use quite a lot more because it's not as dense, the pigment isn't as dense as titanium. I just want to bring value up a little bit. Put a little bit on the tag. In the same way, I'm going to hold that against. See what I've got. So I'm holding it against the panel, right? My hand is against the panel. And I'm holding it at the same angle to the light as the panel, because what I need to know, I mean, I can angle it this way, and then, you know, it will get brighter, it will get lighter, obviously, but that won't help me because I won't be able to match that color here. And this is the basic problem of painting, is that here we have a three-dimensional object, and here we have a two-dimensional surface. And the value range of a two-dimensional surface is much lower than the value range of a three-dimensional object. I think we've got pretty close, would you say? It's still slightly, very slightly lower value, but already the chroma is starting to drop. So there's not much I can do there. I would have to compromise. The only other thing that I could possibly do is this color, this yellow lake, is slightly higher value. The chroma, the hue is slightly different. It's slightly more green. Okay, but if I mix some of this with my lead white, I'll be able to get up to that value range with slightly, very slightly more chroma. I mean, we're talking about such small changes here. Let me put a bit of that on here. You can see that it's slightly more green though, right? But we can eke out a tiny bit more chroma on this one. Try and get that on. It's more difficult to paint opaquely with this tube paint because it's slightly transparent. You see, I mean, the chroma is really close. I'm not sure even if the camera can pick this up, if the cameras are sensitive enough to pick this up. But it has very slightly more chroma and it's slightly lighter. Of the two, I would say it's slightly closer. So, for those two, notice that I'm not using any Munsell chips here as well. You can do this without Munsell. And it should be very obvious to you when you put the colours side by side, as I've got them on the palette here, with that as my light colour. And for my shadow colour, I was saying it was somewhere in between these two, right? This is too orange. This is probably about the right hue, but the chroma is probably too low. The chroma is quite low on that. But what would happen, do you think, if I mixed this, which is the cad yellow, with this? Burnt sienna. The chroma is quite high. It's going to drop the value. It's going to swing the hue way around here because my burnt sienna is like over here in terms of hue. So it's going to swing the hue right over. But we want that. We want it to go a lot more orange. So what happens if we mix those two together? So I'm thinking about the hue. If I went straight for, say, raw umber there, I would lose a huge amount of chroma because raw umber is a very low chroma color. But also, it would be swinging it round towards green, if anything, which is really not where I want to go. So I've got, this is handy to have these here because I can kind of see what my target is. But you can also do this just by gradual trial and error with the little tag, you know. Still need to bring it down further. I've actually run out. What I'm after doing is bringing it down to the right value. So I thought about the hue first. I wanted to swing it around orange. I know I want to bring the value down. So this is more orange and it's a lower value and it's getting me down now. I'm slowly, bit by bit, I'm getting down there. But I would say, if anything, it's closer to this one. And remember, it was slightly between these two. Now, you could argue that trying to obsessively match a color this way is not always necessary in a painting, and I would agree with you. When I paint a lot now, quite often I will change the hue of the colors that I see. Let me show you a quick example of that, this painting that I've just finished. It will show under this light. This teapot is much more purple. This blue is much more purple in real life, but I wanted it to go more towards a greenish blue because then it kind of goes along with this stuff and it helps the roses to stand out a little bit more. I thought anyway, so that's why I changed the hue there, but I kept the value and the chroma the same. So you don't always want it to be exact. But the reason this is such good practice is it really develops the sensitivity of your eye. It's a little bit too light. Needs to come down even further. And it's definitely going, it's probably even more reddish orange than this color here. So I know I'm swinging around too reddish orange. And I could also check that. If I didn't have the chips, I can check it with my little tag. So if I wipe it off, that's why this, I mean, it doesn't have to be clear card. Clear plastic. It can be, but you need to be able to wipe it off. I can check it. I'll show you, like, assuming you don't have the Munsell chips, right? Get as close as you can. Do the same thing. Put a little bit on there. Palette knife is best for this, actually, because you can get it really flat. Let's have a look and check it. Pretty surprising. Oh, this color looks like, it doesn't, you wouldn't mix that for a shadow color, would you really? But it's actually really close. It's just too orange, right? It's a little bit too light still. It needs to go darker. It's too orange. So here I am with this color. I'm thinking about what I want to do with this color to get it closer to where it should be. It needs to move. It needs to be slightly darker, right? And it needs to move around the hue wheel. You could say it needs to be cooler. I prefer to say it needs to be back around towards yellow. It's gone too far right over to this area in terms of hue, and it wants to move back round this way. So what are my choices? Well, I could use this, which is my raw umber. That will drop the chroma quite a lot though, and I don't really want to drop the chroma. There's a lot of choices for what I could do. I can move this color. I could actually, if I wanted to be really extreme about it. Cindy, here's that sap green I was talking about. I need to move it around the hue wheel, right? Why don't I use that? It's further round here, isn't it? It's definitely going to pull it round that way, and it's fairly high chroma too, and it's darker. It seems a really unlikely choice, but out of just for sake of seeing what happens, let's try it. Put a little bit in. It's quite a bit darker already. I'm just going to put a tiny bit. It's quite strong chroma-wise. I don't want to swing it too far. Why would you put green in? Seems like the wrong thing to do. But all I want to do is to shift it around the hue wheel. And look how that colour is. I used a very small amount. Look how that colour is going from here round towards this one. It's lost chroma a little bit, but not much, and it's got very, very close to that one. This is why I don't like to think so much in terms of warm and cool. I like to think of which direction I'm pulling a colour around the hue wheel. You wouldn't think that green would do it, but it plainly did. So let's try it. Hard to say. I mean, I'd say that's pretty much nailed, really. I need to hold it exactly. That's really hard to judge. I think maybe it even needs to go a bit more yellow. Maybe a little bit more yellow. But there's other ways that I could get there, right? Let's find another way to get there to roughly the same color. But that's really close, right? Let me have a quick look at the comments, actually, because that's probably, unless you've done my color course or you've been on a workshop with me, that's probably a different way of color mixing than you're used to thinking about, right? Oh yeah, lemon yellow. Catherine, I'm just looking at your comment about which colors I've got out there. I had lemon yellow, yes, PY35, yellow lake, PY74, yeah, cad yellow, genuine, that was from Cranfield. Yellow ochre, burnt sienna, raw umber, and burnt umber. Burnt umber was the other one. Brown is a low chroma red. Yeah, well, we now know that really brown is a low chroma, is a low value orange. It's a low value orange, not low chroma. Burnt umber by Cranfield. Yeah, it would be fun to play with blues and greens for landscapes. Absolutely, sure. Okay, yeah. Sorry, Kay. I know this one is going to go on a little while, but thank you for coming. I'm probably too late, and you're probably already gone. But anyway, no, pink hasn't been done. This is the first one. I'm doing yellow first. Yeah, this is the first one. Yeah. And Sean says, "Do you always work with a color chart handy? It's like another tool for you while you paint." Not always, but for about 10 years I did. So I find I'm at the point now where I don't need to be as careful about my mixing, because I found that now I have this information here. I have pretty much internalized. I have a map of the color space in my head, and I can pretty much know what I have to mix with, what to get anywhere within that color space, within that color solid. And that does take some time and practice to get. But you can also get there through a little bit of trial and error and checking and thinking about it clearly. The green was the sap green from Old Holland. Yes, I'm not using lemon yellow because I know the hue was too far over, okay? But that's got me really close. I mean, that would do for my shadow color, right? That would do for my light, and that would do for my shadow color. It's really, really close to what's actually there. But maybe there's another way that I can get to this color. You know, what about if I started other choices? Let's see what happens if I take burnt umber, which we know is slightly orange, right? It's low chroma, slightly orange, and we could mix that with, I'll just put a bit more burnt sienna out just in case I want to use that again. Let's try mixing that with cad yellow. Let's see where we go. This time we're way more green, right? Much, much, much too green. So that was burnt umber and cad yellow. The chroma has ended up somewhere fairly close, but the hue is very different. Let's try that one against what's actually there. That's pretty close. It probably has, I'd say the chroma is slightly low. Possibly the chroma is a little bit low. But I can't get any more chroma out of it. That's, you know, that's the most I can get. We're probably, actually, in terms of hue, we probably want something that's somewhere between that and that, or between that and that. And if you find yourself in a situation like that, you can very easily just take some of one, more green, some of another, more orange, and you have like the most fine control of where the hue goes now. This should be, the hue should be pretty much nailed. And if I wanted it to be more like this one, then I'd just add a little bit more. See, I'm mixing this one and this one together so that I can really nail the hue. I can't quite get the chroma, but I can get really, really close to the hue. Even just the mixing part of this, even if you don't actually do any painting, is a fantastic exercise. You would never normally mix this carefully, right? What happens most of the time, if you're anything like me, as I was when I was learning and trying to figure out colour, I would get somewhere near, bang it on, and then see. And then try and tweak it from there. This is like a much more exacting way to approach it. But it teaches you an awful lot more about colour and about the hues of your paints. So the chroma is, I can't get the chroma. I just can't get the chroma. The shadow, not quite. I would say the value looks like it might be slightly high, actually. And that has gone a little bit too green as well, I think. So I was probably closer with the first version that I did. Which is this one here. So that would, anything around here would probably work, but that's going to be the closest one probably to the shadow color. So what I've actually ended up with, although it might surprise you, and these colors would also work for a lemon. This is a general light and a general shadow. If I wanted to mix between them for half tones, I could actually do it like this. And quite often that will work, but you still need to check it fairly carefully. I mean, you can put together a form modeling string like this once you have, most of the time you can, once you have the light and the shadow, okay? Now, what I'm probably going to do now is I'm gonna wrap this one up at this point, because we've gone well over an hour, coming up to like an hour and 20 minutes now, and I don't want to go on too long and chuck too much at you at once. The bit that I'm really interested in is the color mixing. Now I've got these colors pretty much nailed, right? And I know where they are because I've checked them in the Munsell book. Paint on my laptop, as I often do. So what I'm going to do for the next stream is I'm going to take these colors and I'm going to paint. I'm not going to have time to do it now because it would take me about an hour to do it, and we'd be approaching 2.5 hours by the time we get through it. I think that's probably too much for a live video for people to watch. So I'm going to do that next month. I'm going to paint a study of the yellow cube and the lemon, and I'm going to show you how breaking down those colors and thinking about how I'm mixing them, especially with regard to the hues in my tube paints, will help me paint a really convincing lemon. And if you follow steps like this carefully, you will never struggle with getting the light and the shadow colors right for something that ostensibly people think is often very difficult, like a lemon again. And that's ultimately where I want to get you to, where you feel confident about being able to find the colors that you need to paint something realistically, okay, or as realistically as you possibly can in paint. And once you're at that point, when things are starting to jump off your painting surface at you and to look real, then you are free to make aesthetic decisions about what you want to change. Like I just showed you, like I did, I changed the hue of the blue on the little teapot. I do that kind of thing quite a lot these days if I just want to just slightly change the color harmony because I think it's going to work better in the painting. The reason I can do that with confidence now is because I've done a lot of this. So I know I'm able to change the hue of a color and the hue of all of the colors, the shadow and the light that I've used to paint a particular object without affecting the value or the chroma. And I think that's a really important skill to have if you want to get really good at realism, is to be able to understand how to nail those colors and then how to manipulate them so that you can make something which hopefully is more poetic, has more feeling to it, nicer color harmonies, but also can really pop and look more real. Okay. Yeah, I think everybody's saying they have to go now. We really are getting to the point where we're up to about an hour and a half. So I'm going to leave it there now. I hope that was useful and informative and a little bit different than what you're used to seeing. As I say, next month for the next stream, I'm going to go on to actually using these colors to paint something. I had to go a lot further into the makeup of each of those tube colors and how I was choosing them and why they were the right ones to use. And that does take some time. But over this set of streams that I'm going to use, I'm going to cover this stuff with, by the time we've done a few of them, you should all be at the point, once you've watched them through and tried some of this stuff for yourself, you should be able to get to the point where you will never struggle to match a color again. You'll never struggle to find a color you want or a color you need. If you internalize this method and you are still struggling to match a color, it's probably because it can't be found in paint. There are lots of those out there. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. I hope that was interesting, and I'll see you again.